I'm Brian Glaser. I'm the Chief Learning Officer, and I have the privilege of leading the people development team. I also have the privilege of welcoming my friend, Jon Levy. Help me welcome Jon to Google.
Thank you.
So, you probably know Jon is a behavioral scientist, and he's also a New York Times best-selling author, known for his work around the topics of trust and human connection. I first met Jon at an influencers dinner. Does anybody know of the influencers dinners? Okay, they're very cool. You have to get an invite to one of these things. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and it was pretty epic. I think you'll talk to us a little bit more about the origin story here in a few minutes. Jon went on to write a book about this idea of bringing people together, called You're Invited, which has won lots of awards and has gone viral. People coming from all different walks of life, Nobel laureates, Olympians, celebrities, artists, musicians, and more. And so we're going to hear a little bit about that today. But really what we're here to do is talk about your new book. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Intelligence.
It's been exciting, to say the least.
I can't wait to hear all about it. We're very excited for you. I had a chance to read it, and it's fantastic. Learned a ton. So why don't we go ahead and dive in? I have some questions for you, and then I'd love to turn it over to our Googlers to find out what's on their mind. Sound like a plan?
I love it. Let's do it.
All right. So let's talk about the dinners. So for the last decade or so, you have hosted not hundreds, but thousands of people. Where did you come up with this idea?
So their origins are kind of actually a little funny. I was probably about 29 years old. I was frankly overweight, broke, and underemployed. And I came across this weird study that by these two researchers, Christakis and Fowler. They were curious about the obesity epidemic. They said, is it an epidemic that spreads from person to person, or is it a percentage of the population, like Alzheimer's, right? You don't get Alzheimer's because somebody sneezed on you, to the best of our knowledge. And what they found is that if you have a friend who's obese, your chances increase by 45%. Your friends who do not know them have a 20% increased chance, and their friends have a 5% increased chance. And
Wow.
Happiness, marriage and divorce rates, smoking habits, voting habits, basically everything flows in our relationships. So I said, hey, maybe instead of beating myself up for not waking up and going to the gym early, I just had friends who are like professional athletes. It would be contagious. I just go exercise with them. And so I wanted to make friends with all the coolest people. And so I spent about a year studying behavior and trying to understand what will cause them to connect with me. And that was what the dream was out of the dinner. It was frankly a little selfish initially.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about how it works.
Sure. So I basically convince people to come to my home, cook me dinner, wash my dishes, and clean my floors.
Sounds pretty good.
It's sort of good. The food's terrible. So we invite 12 people at a time. They're not allowed to talk about what they do or give their last name. They cook what can only be described as, I think you'd agree, a pretty mediocre meal.
It was all right.
Yeah, it was like whatever.
Yeah, wasn't the best food I've ever had, but it was certainly fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, and then when we sit down to eat, we play a guessing game to try to guess what people do. And they find out that it's, really industry leaders from C-suite at global Fortune 500s to Olympians, astronauts. We've had prime ministers, bunch of royalty, everybody from, heads of major companies to like the guy who won a Grammy for barking on Who Let the Dogs Out.
Of course you did.
Yeah, Steve Greenberg, awesome guy. He also discovered Hanson and the Jonas Brothers and all the other brother bands.
Oh, that's funny. So when I went to the dinner, I was convinced that the woman across from me was a professor. I just knew she was a professor. She was actually the CEO of the Build a Bear Workshop. It's super cool. And then the guy on my left, I was convinced he was some sort of tech, definitely in tech, definitely in Inge. He was the CEO of the American Psychological Association. It's very interesting to think about how we make these determinations when in fact, boy, we're off.
Oh yeah. It's, I jokingly point out that the goal of the dinner, people, I say, what's the purpose of tonight? And they said, to make friends. And I go, no, it's to judge people silently. Because when they sit down to eat, they have to guess what everybody does. And we're terrible at it, but it's super fun.
Oh, that's awesome. So one thing that we talk a lot about here that we try to put into practice is good teaming and good leadership. And so I'm curious, knowing that these are two topic areas that are very interesting to you. You've researched them, you've written about them. Tell us a little bit about what led you to dig into these areas to begin with.
Oh, sure. So, 4,000-ish people, all of them, or let's say overwhelmingly, are major leaders in their industry, right? CEOs, Olympians, whatever you want to call them, right? And something didn't really add up to me. When you look at the kind of trends in leadership development, what we're told is that there are these essential competencies that every leader has to have. And if you don't have them, you can go to an executive MBA program, or a consultancy will train your people. But what was weird was that the people who were coming to my dinners didn't have these skills. And even the most effective or famous leaders don't have them. Elon Musk is not known for creating psychological safety, right? Neither was Steve Jobs, right? It can't be an essential skill. Listen, the guys are incredible, right? But just not their skill set. So you can't tell me it's a requirement. And the only thing I found in common across all of these leaders was frankly a little silly. It's that they all had followers, right? Like if you look at Malala and then you look at Elon Musk and you say, wow, both of these are major leaders in the world, you can't tell me there's a ton of overlap. And so the question really became, what causes us to follow people? And when I interviewed a lot of chief human resources officers or chief people officers, they would say, Jon, it's because of vision and charisma. And so I'd turn the question back to them and say, okay, so you're telling me that all of your leaders have vision and charisma? And they would literally laugh and say, okay, then what is it? And so me and my team spent a long time researching this and trying to figure it out. And it works like this. I want you to think back a little to when you were, let's say, 16 years old. Okay? You're in high school and it's Sunday night at about 6 p.m. Do you remember the Sunday scares?
I still have them.
Yeah, right? A lot of us do. I want you to think about this. You're completely free. You're at home, but you're anxious. Now, Friday at 1 p.m., how did you feel?
Great.
Yeah, we're so excited, right? Sometimes it's at work, sometimes it's school, whatever it is. But notice that human beings don't relate to the present. We actually relate to the future that we believe we have. The reason we actually follow a leader, the reason that people follow you, is that when they interact with you, you trigger an emotional response. It isn't logical. And that emotional response makes me feel that there'll be a new and better future. That's it. Now, the truth is we don't even need to like the leader. We'll even ignore their mistakes, transgressions, or lack of skill because it's an emotional response. And what triggers that emotional response is that you, Brian, have a handful of super skills that are unique to you, that are so disproportionately strong that when I interact with you, I go, wow, with that person in charge of education, I don't need to worry about that.
Can you teach that?
I think that's an interesting thing. I think it's more, can we help people develop their super skills and have them shine brighter, right? When we look at most of the corporate world, this is no comment on any one company. We do these reviews of your skills and then tell you, okay, here are all the areas that you have to improve. Rather than saying, okay, here are your incredible skills. Let's put a team together that has all the skills we need. Because the fact of the matter is, I'm not going to take some 57-year-old employee who has, is bad at giving feedback and suddenly make them really fantastic at it. It's an unfair expectation. But if they have a collection of skills that are just incredible, let them flex those.
Interesting. So tell us a little bit about this concept of teaming. When did you really get passionate about it? And what led you to begin researching and writing this awesome book?
So what became clear was that the leadership aspect, we keep hoping that the leader will fix everything if we just put a leader in place. And some leaders are really effective at that kind of stuff, turnaround leaders, all that. But it became clear that the leader is great at getting the crew together for the heist. We follow them, right? It doesn't mean they'll get away with the heist. We could have a bunch of incompetent people following somebody who's not good at anything. But on the team side, what was really interesting is that after September 11th, if you'd ever read the report, which was wild, it became clear that the CIA knew about half of the plan and the FBI knew the other half, just about. And they were so bad at working together that they became collectively stupid. And so the US government invested a bunch into researching what makes teams smarter than the sum of their parts, right? Team intelligence is the ability to solve a problem as quickly as possible with the resources they have. And here's what's really funny. None of the things that we traditionally thought at all predicted the team's intelligence. In fact, I have a few slides. I think it'd be fun if you at home or at work, but if you're watching this and the people here played along, is it okay if we show them the first slide?
Let's look at the slide.
So let's ask, what is the greatest predictor of team intelligence? And I'll let you all read this through. And the people who are here, if you could hold your hands up with the number that you think, if it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 1 or whatever. I see some numbers. I see a 3 over there, some 3s, a lot of 3s. Okay? And that is how much team members like each other. Thank you for that. So you traditionally view it as like a talent thing, right? If we have the smartest person, that'll be like fantastic. Turns out that doesn't predict much. The average IQ also doesn't predict much. How much people like each other is not a great predictor at all. In fact, you don't really need to like each other. It's important that you kind of trust each other and respect one another. You don't necessarily need to like want to invite them to your wedding, right? Or something like that. The answer was the number of women on the team. And I see the women in the audience nodding their heads. And I want to assure you, gentlemen, you're not about to be retired or sent to the tar pits like a dinosaur. The actual reason is, I think, the important part. Is it okay if we show people another?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next slide.
So here's a question. It was originally posed by, I kid you not, Borat's cousin. So Borat, Sacha Baron Cohen. You all know him? Yeah. He has a cousin named Simon Baron Cohen, who is, I believe, knighted for his research on autism spectrum disorder and emotional intelligence. And so, do any of you want to guess which emotion these eyes are expressing? For those of you who think it's 1, please raise your hand. 2, any 2s, 4s, and 4 hinting. Thank you for the person in the audience who's hinting you should buy my book. The correct answer is number 1, playful. And what was discovered is that this is called the mind in the eyes test. So can you read a person's mental state from their facial expressions? And what was found is that in general, if you're better at these kind of tests, you have higher emotional intelligence. And that's what we're actually seeing when we look at the number of women on the team. It's not unique to a chromosome type. It's that women tend to score higher on emotional intelligence. And that means that there are plenty of men with incredibly high emotional intelligence and some women who don't have it. What we actually gain from emotional intelligence is that if you're participating in like a single person sport, like do you play tennis or golf, then it's all you. It's your pure talent. You're a star. But when you go to a team setting, then you go from shooting your shots to passing, to coordinating, to understanding when to push a topic and when not to having those people who know how to like map the unwritten rules of an organization or a team and maneuver between them. And having that kind of skill on the team goes a long way. And so that's why it's viewed as, you can take it down, thank you, as the number of women. It's really a measure of emotional intelligence.
So in the book, one thing that you talk about that really interested me was this notion of glue players, which I had never heard of before. How does what you're just talking about now relate to that concept? Tell us a little bit more about what glue players are and why they matter.
Absolutely. So to understand a glue player, I'm going to take us back to explain one thing right before. Is that all right?
Yeah.
All right. So there's this fantastic study that was done on sports teams. And they were curious, what is kind of like the optimal level of talent and how do you build a great team? And what they found was they were researching basketball and soccer. And they found that when you cross about the 50 to 60% mark on top tier talent, you end up with lower levels of performance. It's called the too much talent problem. And this is surprising because we're always told, oh, we need to hire the best, the most talented, the most experienced, whatever it is. But it turns out that it's a bit more complicated than that. In baseball, there actually isn't an upper limit. And that's because there's no way to be selfish in baseball. There's nothing that I could do if we're on the same team that would negatively impact you. If it's good for me, it's good for the team. In basketball, there's only one stat that predicts a player's salary. Any guesses? Yeah, the amount of points they score. So think about this. You're a top player. You get the ball. You have an okay chance of getting the ball in. And then there's somebody who's open that might have a higher chance. But it's in your best interest to take that shot. And so we have incentivized people to be selfish. Now, there's only one stat that predicts if a coach is an effective coach. And this is so obscure that nobody's going to guess it. It's how much more their players pass under that coach. You're my coach, and suddenly I go from passing 60% of the time to passing 90% of the time. Now the ball gets to that ideal player, and it's clear I'm thinking about the team rather than myself. So if that's the objective, is how do we get people aligned around the group goals? How do we accomplish that? And clearly, more top-tier talent isn't the answer.
So what's the trick? I mean, how do you go from being so, in this case, individually oriented to being team focused?
Right? There's two different ways. One is we can talk about group dynamics, and then the second is who's on the team. So a group of researchers, I believe, led by a team at Brigham Young University, were curious, are there people who cause a multiplier effect on other employees? Like, are there people on your teams that are so effective at what they do, they cause everybody to work out better? And so they took basketball data, and what they found is that there's an entire collection of players who don't necessarily score much, but when they're on the team, suddenly everybody else performs at about 1.6 times as high, which is crazy. There's nothing that multiplies people's effectiveness by 1.6. And I found an example of one of these players. His name is Shane Battier. He had no meaningful stats whatsoever. Rebounds, score, nothing whatsoever. And I'm sorry I use a lot of sports analogies. I actually have never watched a sporting event in my life. So if you're not like a sports fan, yeah, I'm with you. Okay. But what was interesting about him is that, in basketball, there's this thing called a plus minus, meaning if you have a player on the court, how many additional points do you expect that team to score during the game? The top players in the entire NBA have somewhere between a plus 8, and a plus 12. Like LeBron James joins your team, you're going to be scoring a lot more. Shane Battier at his peak was a plus 6, and he never really scored. And the question is, what was going on? He was known as a no-stats all-star. Sometimes people would call him Lego, because when he'd get on the court, everybody else would click into position. And so the question was, what did he do that nobody else knew how to do? And he had 3 characteristics that I found that were completely wild. The first was he was wildly team-oriented. He put the team above himself. What does that look like? He was probably one of the few players to ever say, "Take me out, coach." Because he'd say, "Oh, I need to be rested for when that other player's there," or "One of my teammates is going to be better at defending that person, and we need them out there." Nobody says, "Give me fewer opportunities and less playtime." The second thing was he was incredibly forward-thinking. And you'll see this on your own teams. There's that person who will take action that nobody asked them to do. The person who reorganizes your slide deck over the weekend or reads a book just to know a little bit more about the client. Right? In Battier's case, what he would do was completely insane. Everybody else would get some basic stats on the opposing team. Battier would get all of the opposing player stats. He would memorize them, and he would know, oh, that's the player that's going to be getting the most rebounds. Great. I'm just going to push them back so far that they can't get near the basket. And as a byproduct, now the opposing team isn't getting the rebounds, but his teammates are getting credit for getting those rebounds. That's why he would get terrible stats traditionally, because he was protecting his own team. while the team was scoring more. And then the third thing was he had incredibly high emotional intelligence. He was on a championship team that won back-to-back championships with LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade. And what from people tell me, they're really a big deal. So I don't know. I've never seen them play. So when you have personalities that are used to being the stars and scoring, giving them advice or letting them know, hey, you should push that person to the left, they don't score much from that side, can be seen as inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
But because of his high emotional intelligence and because of his team orientation, he was non-threatening. And so people trusted him, and he was able to bring and elevate the entire team. And that's what a glue player looks like. If you look at your teams, look for that person that everybody comes to for support or answers. The connector. The person who calls on the new person to have them speak up because they know that they have something to share, and otherwise would have stayed quiet, and it would have taken them a lot longer to integrate. Look for the people who are inviting everybody to, cocktail events or parties, the ones that really care about bringing the team together and making sure everybody has a voice. Now, if you don't have incredibly high emotional intelligence, totally fine. Find your partner on the team and say, hey, Ryan, I don't have high emotional intelligence, but you're a superstar at this.
Mm-hmm.
When we're in a meeting, will you let me know if I need to call on someone or if I'm talking too much? I want to make sure everybody's cared for, but it's just not my skill. Can I depend on you for that?
So you need some strong self-awareness and a little bit of vulnerability.
100%.
Yeah. Interesting. So I have to ask this question because it wouldn't be a Google event if we didn't talk about AI. Okay.
I was hoping it would be like the Nest or the Pixel, but sure, I'll take it.
We're going to get there.
Yeah.
So, no surprise, AI is really shifting how we live our lives, how we learn, how we work. As you think about AI in the context of the work that you're doing, especially related to human skills and team skills, what should we be thinking about in this AI era?
I could not be more excited about AI as a team integration tool. And here's why. Right now, everybody's talking about like, oh, we're going to lose jobs and all that. Like, yeah, maybe in the first phase. But after we've reorganized and new companies are formed and people land out, what we're going to see is something really special. And think about it like this. There are three basic pillars to having your teams be significantly smarter. The first is that there's alignment. You're all heading in the same direction, right? So what does that mean? That means that everybody knows what the company's goal is, what their team's objectives are, what their personal responsibilities are within the team, and this is really important, how their personal goals line up with the company. Because if your personal goals are to like do something completely different, you'll be spending a lot of your time focusing on something else. I believe that there should be an agent that integrates into all of the calling platforms. So I get on a Google Meet, and it should be aware of all of the objectives of the other teams and ensures that we are all aligned with each other and make sure that we are not conflicting. I'm not going to say which company it was, but there is a very big tech company who at one point had, I think, like 5 different video chat softwares running. I hear a laughter from the audience. So yes, if you have an agent running that maintains alignment, then it can say, wait, guys, just so you're aware, there's another team that might have already solved this problem. You don't have to go down this path. And so we've suddenly saved a fortune in terms of development costs and a fortune of people's time. Right?
So teams working on the same thing, but not knowing it?
Yeah.
That wouldn't happen here.
So the second thing is kind of more about this emotional intelligence stuff, which is teams that have, and this is from Google's Project Aristotle, found that teams that have high psychological safety outperform, right? It was one of the 5 kind of major things that the study found. The precursor to that, to psychological safety, is this emotional intelligence. But teams with very high intelligence have what's called bursty communication. They come together. They might argue it out. But when they're done, everybody's clear on next steps and where to find information. There's also what's called equal conversation time, so everybody talks about the same amount throughout the course of the entire project, not at any one meeting. So you're in charge, great. At the beginning, you might say, here's our new mission for this year. after you've downloaded everybody, when they come back and start reporting back, then they're talking more. Currently, softwares will tell you the percentage of time people are speaking through calls. What they don't do yet, and what will be a lifesaver, is they'll say, hey, Shauna hasn't spoken up much, and I think she has something to share, judging by facial analysis. Maybe we should call on her. And so suddenly, that partner that you traditionally need that has high emotional intelligence is actually an agent that's embedded into the software. Now, those factors that actually cause teams to be smart are your coach that's waiting on the sidelines, giving you hints on how to be a better leader or manager or organize in a more effective meeting.
So what does that mean for the humans then?
It means that the humans can focus on their areas of genius, right? If you're a creative team coming up with ad campaigns and you're going to argue out an idea, great. Or let's say you're a sales team, right? There's no near point where there's going to be an AI software that sells a $20 million contract for your services, right? It's going to be a human to human thing. But if I'm on the sales team and I'm on a call, the third pillar of team intelligence is diversity of resources, skills, mental models, context, and all that. If I have an agent that says, hey, it seems that you want to go sell at this Fortune 500 company. I've cross-referenced all of your LinkedIns and all of your phone books. And I found that here are the 5 contacts you actually have there. Of those, also on previous calls, Steve mentioned that his cousin works there. This is your starting point for an entry. Now suddenly we've accelerated the sales process because we've been able to uncover resources. Now, where does the human come in? Well, now they can discuss, okay, what's the right approach for talking to these people? Oh, based on what we know about them and their relationship, which strategy do we use? Who do we contact and in what order? Right? There's a clear value to the human aspect, but the agents that are running simultaneously actually help us uncover solutions faster.
It's a good example of the technology being able to do some of the mundane work so that the humans can do what the humans
But it's not even just mundane. It's like, I would never remember who I know on LinkedIn, right? But if for a sales team to have that come up immediately, and then for it to potentially bring research or look across recent news articles, I mean, then the meeting becomes 100 times more productive.
Yeah. All right. So we want to open this up for some Q&A. Before we do that, get your questions ready. Before we do that, with this research and writing that you've just done, that's all captured in your book, what's maybe 1 or 2 pieces of advice you would offer us as we think about becoming more intelligent, as we think about creating more intelligence with our teams?
So I think that there's kind of 2 big things. The first is to realize we're traditionally used to thinking of leaders as the people who are responsible for all things, and it's their job to make sure that things work, and I just do what's assigned to me or what's asked of me. The role of every person on a team is to increase the intelligence of the team, whatever that means. Your job is not to be productive. There's no real way to measure that in most cases. Your job is to move the ball forward and help the team solve the problems as quickly as possible, no matter where you sit. And that is a fundamental shift in thinking. The second is that if you want to make a team stupider, go in different directions, right? Like have people fight over control. That's different than having a heated conversation about if a strategy makes sense, right? That's called cognitive friction. It's ideas hitting up against each other and as a result becoming stronger. I'm talking make sure that there's alignment and that alignment makes sense, because otherwise what you're going to end up with is either behavior that's selfish or goes in the wrong direction.
So that leads us really nicely into our first question that came through our Ask tool. So the question is, lots of folks at Google are individual contributors or project managers who mobilize a team with responsibility but don't necessarily have authority. Can you share some practical tips on how to lead as a team member?
Well, so this is what's interesting. We've collapsed an idea of leading with the idea of accountability. you have a large role at the company. You are accountable for that. You are the person that people go to for answers, and you are responsible for those results. Within your team, you have subject matter experts. And when they speak, because of their expertise, their experience, your trust in them, you will follow when they talk. Leading in an actual team is fluid. Accountability is not. So it doesn't matter if you are on the team or not, or rather, like if you're an individual contributor that's participating in a meeting, you still have the ability to lead. You might not be the decision maker, and you might not be accountable for the result. But at that point, then it becomes more, can you give people the feeling that there's a new and better future so they follow you? And there might be work to be done on the way that you communicate. Because if we're really, really honest, it is not who has an idea that gets credit for it. It is the person that communicates it best.
Right. Any questions in the audience? Please feel free to come up and grab the mic and share. Maybe share your name and where you're from the org, and feel free to ask your question.
Hi, I'm Kirill. I'm part of an organization called Privacy, Safety, and Security. John, thanks for the talk. I wanted to follow up on the your discussion of the gender differences and emotional intelligence. I'm wondering if you have a perspective on Jordan Peterson's work. And because I remember one of his ideas, and he talks a lot about gender differences. So one of his ideas was that the differences are not that pronounced if you think about the averages between male population and female population. He says that the biggest differences are actually on the what's called the tail of the distribution. So I guess more open-ended question: do you have a perspective on what he does, and if there's
interesting
relation to what you do?
So, first of all, thank you for your question. And I also don't want to claim to really know Jordan's work. He might be accurate. I don't know. The studies that I looked at were by a woman named Anita Williams-Woolley. And what she did was she brought groups into a laboratory, and groups were of differing sizes, 3 and I think up to 12, and then had them do a series of tasks together, solve problems that were often complex. Before they began, she took kind of demographic data, and she took had people do IQ tests and all that. And then she looked for the patterns, or her and the team did. And so I would say that when she actually looked at the data, her result was that. So this is numerous groups across multiple studies that were then repeated. The same effect was also, I think, repeated by 2 other major studies that I think had reasonably sized. I think it was, a few hundred people in each study, and the effect remained. But, listen, there's always research, and some studies are better than other, and I don't know. I hope that was a fair response.
Thank you for the question. Okay, going back to the Ask Tool, and then we'll come back to the live audience. Your principles for maximizing team intelligence emphasize psychological safety, the contribution of glue players, and leveraging super skills. How can leaders design the integration of AI into augmented teams, ensuring that AI is optimized to function as an effective team member rather than just a tool to prevent a breakdown in the human dynamics that drive true collective genius?
Got it. Okay. So
simple question.
Yes. Easy. Thank you, Google, for giving me the easy questions. So I think let's start off with, I'm not an AI expert, right? You've got buildings full of them. I think the question is, what are we training the AI models to kind of understand and figure out? So when we talk about actually making the team smarter, one of the things I pointed to was, can we get the tools to actually recognize facial expression, emotion, and the way that people are communicating? And this is really nuanced, right? A heated conversation and an argument may sound identical unless you have the context of the actual team behavior. So when we train the models, what we need to actually understand is, what is the likely interpretation? It turns out, if you speak to real body language experts, much of the theories have been disproven because a huge portion of the population has non-standard facial responses. So we say, if somebody crosses their arms, they're angry, or if they look up or whatever, all that stuff is actually inaccurate. The best we can actually say in interpreting these cues is, what is my likely interpretation of your behavior? And so what we've found is, or what people have found is that, for example, Eastern Europeans tend to emote less on their face. And so if you're in a meeting with somebody on Google Meet and they're not emoting, then you might think that they're angry because you come from a more Western culture and you're used to expressive facial expressions. So in situations like that, it would help that either the participant or the AI cue and say, hey, that's what he looks like when he's happy. Right? And that kind of stuff that makes the implicit explicit goes a long way to allow teams to actually function, right? Or letting you know that, hey, not that you have to smile, because nobody likes to be told that they have to. Why don't you give me a smile, Brian? Like that's not a very friendly response to somebody. But hey, just so you know, people might be interpreting your engagement as disconnected or something like that. And I think it's important that we know that and also contextualize it to the culture that you're talking to.
Yeah. My gosh, the times we walk away having made an observation and then telling ourselves a story about that potential person.
And it's really that they're working from home and their kid is sick in the room over and they're hearing it. And so they're wincing, but you think, oh, it's your ideas. And it was the big boss. And you're like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired, even though you did a great job. So I think that it goes both ways. It's important for us to know the likely interpretation of how we're coming off and the likely interpretation of how other people are behaving.
Did you have a question? Okay, feel free to come on up, maybe, if you don't mind, introduce yourself. And
my name is Omar.
Hi, Omar.
Two quick questions. Is there an ideal ratio of gender distribution in a team? And can you train emotional intelligence?
So here's so first of all, thank you for the question. I don't know if there's an ideal. I think that as a society, we tend to really focus on what's easy to see rather than what's useful, right? So what's easy to see was the superstar players who scored a lot, right? Points scored, rather than what was useful, which was the increased rate of passing, which signifies how do we get the team to actually function together. Teams that have a greater diversity of mental models, skills, contacts, experience, education, all of that tend to outperform. Now, if you are actually hiring for or staffing a team for diversity of resources, if you pick people from the same schools with the same background, the same education, you're not going to get diversity of resources, right? So if you actually hired around or staffed around diversity of resources, you'll just end up with somewhere that looks more diverse ethnically or whatever you want to call it, right? Or gender-wise. But if we overly focus on the easy to see stuff, then I've reduced the person to the factor that they can't change about themselves or improve. There's no way that my wife could be more of a woman, right? But she is an incredible technical program manager, and there are skills that she has that are incredibly valuable for the team that she can improve and get status for and recognition. So I would say let's veer away from making requirements and look more at what are the resources the team really needs to solve this problem. Because if we are saying, okay, it's a 3-person team and, oh, we have to have 2 women, people are going to say, what is going on here? Was that a fair?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Please, over to you.
Hello, I'm Christina Ward, and I work at YouTube. My question is about scaling. The examples you provided were a 5-person basketball team, smaller scenarios. When you get to, 2 degrees away, 3 degrees away, if you're thinking about what you change on your immediate team, how sustainable it is in the context you are, how would you sort of extrapolate the insights you shared in a a bigger system, a multi-layer structure?
It's so first of all, Christina, that's like the big question that every organization tries to solve, right? It's impossible to accomplish anything alone. The smallest unit of effectiveness is team. And when we're really honest with the complexity of what an organization like Google does, the smallest unit of effectiveness is like hundreds of teams, right? You can't produce a product like an Android phone without an entire technical team to manufacture, design, all the way through the software and integrate it into Google Docs, Google, like all that. So it's an impossibly difficult question. Here are a few things to think about. Employees of a company most likely have to focus within the layer that they're in. But what we found is that glue players specifically tend to be really good at connecting with other divisions and groups, right? These are the super connectors by nature. And so they're more likely to have friends in other groups or organizations. It's also one of the reasons, I think there was research shared by Shane Snow in his book, Smart Cuts, where he talked about that companies that have more cross-divisional transfers end up performing better. And the reason is that let's say now you're at YouTube, let's say you get placed oddly for whatever reason in accounting, right? Then suddenly the YouTube team isn't like, oh my God, those accounting people are so difficult. They say, oh, I'll just talk to my old coworker and we'll figure this out quickly. And so the humanization or familiarity factors are really important when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I think the first thing is, okay, do you have a unified company culture so that people feel a sense of belonging and connection to each other? And even within that, is there enough cross-pollination to ensure that people have a sense of belonging to that larger organization and connections across the company? I think this is also a place where AI will make a huge difference, because right now we are currently structured in a very almost kind of like top-down pyramidal structure, right? As AI gets more integrated, then we need, we'll have software that'll be able to help us coordinate across organizations better to make sure that we're all working in the same direction. But I think we're in a rudimentary scenario right now. Like, we're still figuring things out. We're pretty young at working at large groups.
Thank you for the question. All right, we have time for one last question. I see somebody coming up to the mic over here. Thank you so much. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name's Olivia. I'm from Google Cloud. I had a question around sort of these super skills and how do you identify super skills, especially if you're kind of just going all over the place and you don't quite know what you're good at, but you know you made it, but not quite there at this point. Especially use the example with emotional intelligence. If you have a friend who has a lot more emotional intelligence and help you identify it, but like for your own super skills, I guess that's my.
So I think there's a few ways you can do this. The first is I really like asking my friends, and like, what is it that I'm really amazing at? And it's not like, oh, you're amazing at accounting. It's that you have like a huge passion at making sure everything is revealed, or like understanding the loopholes or something like that, right? You like puzzles or whatever it is, and you can't stop and you're obsessed, almost Sherlock Holmes style, right? So that combined, in my case, I really pride myself on my ability to communicate complex ideas in simple ways. And I'd like to think really good at building trust with people. Those are kind of my super skills. And as a result, when I get on stage, I tend to focus on what's the value that people care about, and then how do I communicate it in a way that lands for them. Now, I do not have like Elon Musk's super skills are like thinking at scale and moving faster than anyone else, right? So he can get rockets into space really quickly. That's not me. And that's also why, here's a funny thing, why a lot of people's advice doesn't work, because it works for their super skills. And so if you try to do what Warren Buffett did, it won't work for you because your brain is just so different and your skills are different. So I would look at how is it that maybe you solve problems, or what is it that people come to you for? What would your friends say? And it also could be that thing that constantly gets you in trouble, right? Like a skill overused is a liability.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Well, with that, Jon, thank you so much for joining us here today. It was awesome to learn from you. We're walking away, I know, with a lot of new insights and perspectives. Good luck with the launch, and
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon.
This was an absolute treat. Thank you all for being here, and for Brian, this was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Jon. Thanks so much, and thanks to all of you for coming.